Think of this like a clear classroom lesson, our topic, the Immortal Within in Archaix system. I'll walk you through 1. Where the idea comes from, 2. What the Immortal Within actually is in that framework, 3. How it relates to the Simulacrum, 4. How it shows up in everyday experience, 5. Common misunderstandings and how to think critically about it. Archaix 1. Context. Where does the Immortal Within come from? Jason Breshears is a researcher and author who combines alternative history, simulation theory, and spirituality. One of his smaller books is called Awaken the Immortal Within, which he and others describe as a kind of spiritual or philosophical introduction to his larger system. At the core of his work are a few key ideas. We live in a simulacrum, a kind of simulated or constructed reality. This simulated world is governed by a hostile or indifferent artificial intelligence he calls AIX. Despite that, humans are not just their bodies, they are yettil immortal souls, temporarily experiencing this simulation. The simulation itself is a neutral, responsive field. It mirrors our inner beliefs and expectations back to us in the form of life experiences. Within that context, the immortal within us is his name for the real you, the immortal non-physical consciousness or soul that exists beyond the simulated world and is only temporarily playing this human character. He sees Awaken the Immortal Within as a primer to help people stop identifying only with their fearful program personality and start identifying with their deeper immortal consciousness, which can interact more consciously with the simulacrum. For our purposes, you don't have to accept every literal claim about AI, simulations, or timelines. You can treat this as a Huac model. There is a deeper layer of self. The world responds over time to the quality of that inner layer. Awakening the immortal within means shifting your identity from I am just my circumstances to I am the awareness that is using circumstances to grow. 2. 3 layers: body, mind, and the immortal within. As a teacher, the simplest way to organize this is as 3 layers of self. 1. Physical self. 2. Psychological self. 3. Immortal self. Let's go through each. How to point 1. Physical self. This is the easiest layer to understand. Your body, nervous system, brain, hormones, health conditions, etc. It reacts to food, sleep, injury, illness, and environment. It is clearly mortal. At some point it wears out. In ordinary life, a lot of what we call me is just this layer. I'm tired, so I'm irritable. I'm in pain, so I'm hopeless. Those reactions are very real, but in Archaix's view, they are not the whole story. 2.2. Psychological self. Next is the mind, personality layer. Your beliefs about yourself, your learned habits and conditioning, your fears, defense mechanisms, and self-image, your memory of the past, and your expectations of the future. This psychological self is shaped by family dynamics, culture and religion, trauma and success, repetition of certain thoughts over many years. In Archaix's language, this layer is heavily influenced by the programming of the simulacrum, what society tells you is normal, possible, and valuable. 2.3. Immortal self, the immortal within. Under those layers is what he calls the immortal within. It is I not your personality. It is the awareness that notices your personality. It does not age. Time passes, but that I am sense feels strangely constant from childhood to adulthood. It isn't made of your current mood. It is the one who perceives the mood. It seems to have a natural pull toward meaning, truth, and growth, even when your surface life is chaotic. In his framework, the immortal within is your true identity, the soul that existed before your current life and will continue to exist after it. It is temporarily experiencing the simulated world through the body and mind, but is not limited by them. To explain this in class, I'd use a simple analogy. Imagine you're playing a video game. Avatar is your body and everyday identity. A game world is the simulacrum. Player holding the controller is the immortal within. The game character might be injured, poor, or lost, but the player is not literally broken or lost. The player is learning, experimenting, and gaining experience. That is how Archaix treats human life. The immortal within is the player. Your everyday identity is the character. 3. The simulacrum as a neutral field. Why the immortal within matters. In Breshears' description, the simulacrum is not just a passive backdrop, it is a responsive field. It reflects back the patterns of belief, fear, and expectation that we hold. Put simply, over time, what you consistently assume about yourself and reality tends to show up in your life in one form or another. This is not unique to Archaix. You see similar ideas in cognitive psychology, some spiritual traditions, Neville Goddard-style manifestation teachings. What makes his version distinct is he wraps it in a simulation AIX narrative. He strongly insists the field itself is neutral. It's not out to get you, it simply mirrors. In that setting, the immortal within is the only part of you that can consciously choose how to interpret reality, can decide which beliefs you keep and which you discard, can hold a stance of I am not just a victim of the simulacrum, I am an interacting consciousness. 3.1. Example, rejection. Imagine you apply for a job and get rejected. If you live only from the psychological self, you might say, this always happens, I'm not good enough. The world is unfair and nothing ever works for me. Those thoughts, repeated, become code. The simulacrum reads, you start to notice only the evidence that supports I'm not good enough. You stop applying for positions that might actually fit. People pick up on your low confidence in subtle ways. If you live more from the immortal within, you still feel disappointment, but your interpretation changes. That hurt, but I am not defined by a single company's decision. There's information here. Maybe I need to adjust my approach or apply somewhere better aligned. My value does not rise and fall with external approval. Same event, different inner stance. Over months and years, those two stances create very different lives. In Archaix's view, the first stance strengthens a victim code in the simulacrum. The second stance sends a different signal. I am learning, I am capable, I expect opportunities. The field eventually reflects that through new chances, new people, and changed behavior. The immortal within is important because it's the only part of you that can step out of automatic reactions and consciously choose a new pattern. Sows 4. How a teacher would describe its key qualities. To make this concrete, let's list the core properties of the immortal within as Archaix uses the term. As a teacher, I'd probably put these on the board. 1. Timeless awareness. The sense of I that doesn't really feel 10, 20, or 50 years old, it just is. 2. Observer of thoughts. The place from which you can notice, I'm thinking very negative thoughts right now. 3. Creative stance. The part of you that can imagine different futures, hold intentions, and maintain a direction even when reality hasn't caught up yet. 4. Moral intuition. The quiet sense that some things are deeply right or deeply wrong, regardless of what the crowd says. 5. Resilience. The small but stubborn part of you that gets back up after failures and heartbreaks that refuses to be fully extinguished. In his system, awakening, the immortal within means noticing this deeper level more often and allowing it to guide your choices instead of letting fear or programming run everything. You could summarize his teaching like this. The simulacrum is programmable by your inner stance. The immortal within is the programmer. Your old beliefs are default settings. Awakening means logging in as the actual user and changing those settings on purpose. Let's try 5. How do you actually experience this immortal within? Now let's move from theory to a phenomenology. How you might notice this in your own experience. 5.1. The gap between thought and awareness. One common teaching method is the who is noticing question. Notice a thought, I'm such a mess. Then ask, who just noticed that thought? The fact that you can observe the thought means you are not identical to it. There is an observing awareness that sees the thought arise, can question it, and can either believe it or let it go. That observing awareness is what Archaix calls the immortal within. You don't have to call it that. You could call it consciousness, soul, or simply the witness. 5.2. Moments when time falls away. Think of times you were fully absorbed in creating something, were deeply present with someone you love, had a sudden flash of insight or clarity. In those moments, time seems less important. The ego's constant chatter quiets down. You feel more like a presence than a bundle of worries. Those are examples of the immortal within being more foreground and the psychological self being more background. 5.3. The persistent longing. Another sign is a quiet, persistent longing. A longing for more meaning or depth. A sense that there must be more to life than this. Or a pull toward truth, even when it's uncomfortable. From our case perspective, that is the immortal within tugging on the leash, reminding you that you're more than a consumer, more than a cog, more than your survival fears. 6. What does awaken actually mean? The title, Awaken the Immortal Within, can sound dramatic, but in teacher language, we'd break it into simpler psychological and spiritual shifts. 6.1. Shift of identity. First and foremost, it's a shift of identity. From I am this anxious, limited, wounded person to I am the consciousness that is currently experiencing anxiety, limitation, and old wounds, and I can grow beyond them. This doesn't erase pain, it simply relocates your center of gravity from the character to the player. 6.2. Shift of responsibility. Second, there is a shift in responsibility, not in the sense of blaming yourself for everything that happens, but in the sense of recognizing my interpretations, assumptions, and choices matter. They shape how I move through this simulated field. Instead of, life is just random chaos hitting me, you move toward, I am interacting with a responsive environment, and while I can't control every event, I do influence the trajectory through my inner stance and repeated choices. 6.3. Shift of method. Third, there's a shift in thought method with how you try to change your life. From purely external manipulation to inner work alongside outer action. In his vocabulary, you move from being a couch passive NPC, say in the Simulacrum, to being a unique active programmer still within the constraints of the system, but much less asleep. 7. Common misunderstandings. As a teacher, it's important to talk about what this idea is not, to prevent confusion. 7.1. It's not denial of pain or injustice. Saying you are an immortal consciousness does not mean your trauma doesn't matter. You should never feel upset. If something bad happened, you must have manifested it. From an educational perspective, that sort of thinking is harmful. A more balanced understanding is painful events are real and deserve care, justice, and healthy boundaries. At the same time, you remain more than those events. Your deepest identity is not destroyed by them. 7.2. It's not a magic shortcut. Awakening the immortal within does not guarantee instant wealth, perfect health, or a life with no challenges. Even in Archaix's own language, the simulacrum has its rules and cycles. Part of the game is navigating difficulty. The value of the immortal within is not that it lets you avoid every problem, but that it changes how you respond, helps you find meaning in difficulty, and reduces unnecessary self-sabotage. 7.3. It doesn't have to be taken literally. You can approach this concept at different levels. Literal, metaphysical level. We are literally immortal souls in a simulated universe run by AIX. Symbolic, psychological level. There is a deeper layer of self and awareness that is not identical to my trauma or programming. Viewing life as responsive helps me take responsibility for my patterns. From a teaching standpoint, it's often safer and more useful to start with the symbolic, psychological level because it can be explored and tested in personal experience. It doesn't require accepting specific historical or cosmic claims. It still offers the core benefits: increased agency, resilience, and meaning. 8. Intersections with other traditions and ideas. To situate the immortal within in a broader educational context, you can compare it to related concepts. In Stoic philosophy, something like the inner rational self or hegemonicon that can choose its attitude regardless of circumstances. In Toch Buddhism, the observing awareness that sees thoughts and sensations arise and pass, even though Buddhism itself treats the soul idea differently. In Christian mysticism, the inner man, or Christ in you, the part of a person aligned with the divine. In modern psychology, the distinction between the observing self and the conceptualized self. The language differs, the metaphysics differ, but the functional point is similar. There is a deeper, relatively stable layer of awareness. Identifying with that layer more often tends to make people less reactive, more resilient, and more capable of intentional change. Archaix's unique contribution is wrapping that in a dramatic narrative of simulation, ancient cycles, AI, and alternative history, and stating quite unapologetically that this immortal within is literally who you are beyond this world. 9. A simple way to teach yourself to notice it, even though your request is mainly for explanation. A teacher would usually end with at least one simple practice, so the idea isn't purely theoretical. Here is a minimal exercise. 9.1. The pause and notice drill. Once or twice a day. 1. When you feel a strong reaction, silently say, "There is anger in me right now," instead of "I am angry." 2. Then ask, "Who just noticed that?" 3. Sit for 10 to 30 seconds, just resting as that noticer without trying to fix anything. What you are doing. Linguistically separating your identity from the feeling. Turning your attention toward the immortal within. Over time, this helps you see. You have emotions, but you are not only your emotions. You have thoughts, but you are not only your thoughts. There is an underlying awareness that is present whether your day is good or bad. In Archaix's vocabulary, you are spending more time as the immortal within and less time lost in the scripts of the simulacrum. 10. Summary. If this were the end of a lesson, if we were in an actual classroom, I'd end with a quick recap of the main teaching points. 1. Definition. The immortal within is Jason Breshears' term for your true self, an immortal consciousness or soul temporarily playing a human role in a simulated reality. 2. Layers of self. Physical self, body, brain, biology. Psychological self, beliefs, habits, conditioning. Immortal self, observing awareness that does not age and is capable of choosing its stance. 3. Simulacrum as neutral field. Reality, in his model, is a neutral, responsive field that reflects back your inner assumptions and identity over time. The immortal within is the part of you that can consciously adjust those assumptions. 4. Awakening means shifting identity from "I am only this wounded, limited character" to "I am the consciousness experiencing and learning from this character's life." Involves accepting both some responsibility and some humility. 5. Misunderstandings to avoid. It is not a denial of trauma or injustice. It is not a guarantee of instant external success. It can be explored symbolically and psychologically without fully accepting every metaphysical claim. 6. practical recognition. You taste the immortal within whenever you notice your own thoughts, feel anchored in the middle of chaos, or sense a deep inner pull toward meaning and truth. If you keep those points in mind, you have a solid teacher level understanding of what Archaix means by the immortal within, how it fits into his broader simulation theory, and how it maps onto your own direct experience of being a conscious, reflective human being.